from Vulture Culture. This is the Kawai SX-240 from 1984. This is the biggest, baddest analog synth ever released by Kawai, and it is so special to have this synthesizer in the room. This is basically a mint condition synth that was just restored by Severed Machines down in South Florida, and there were, in theory, what it appears to be is there was less than 1,000 of these ever made. So the fact that this thing has survived almost 40 years to make it into the studio today is just a privilege and an honor to be able to be here with you guys in this live stream and check it out. So we're going to start off by playing some patches, which is a lot of fun. In this first patch, Movin', hopefully you guys can see all of it pretty well on the screen, but if you can, it says Movin'. I'll try to remember to say it. Immediately gets across what's so cool about this synthesizer and the sound that it has. So yeah, it's immediately, we've got pretty snappy envelopes that we can use. I think it sounds really immediately clean and has a sort of charisma to it. And we have a fatness there because this synthesizer comes with the SSM 2044 filter chip, which is the same filter from the Prophet 5 Rev 1 and Rev 2. So the coveted two revisions, the first two versions of the Prophet 5 came with the SSM 2044 chip, as well as some other legendary synthesizers like the PPG Wave and the Korg Polysix. There's something about SSM chips that just sound incredible. I love Curtis Electro music chips as well, but there's something about the warmth of these chips that sounds so great. And this particular SX-240 I had modified to have the Tontec mod added in, and what that allows you to be able to do is control the parameters over MIDI. And so I have a stereo-opping controller here that's the SX-240 controller for this. It's about $500 I think. And that gives you the one knob per function control over the synth that you don't have manually. Now, what I could do is go into the parameters here, and it's not so bad. You just kind of scroll over. You can see that little LED hopefully run across the screen. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's happening. And so you just scroll over to cut off, and we could do the same thing with this wheel. And that's okay, but it is more fun to be able to do it with just... Everybody loves knobs and faders, right? And while we're here, because this is a pretty good example, I'm going to take a second and just boost the volume up just a little bit because it sounds a little quiet to my ears. We can always turn it down, I suppose. But we can increase the resonance and try that again. Really nice throaty character to it. If I dial the resonance up pretty drastically, you're going to immediately hear there's a little bit of movement from the envelope and LFO in there. Wow. You can hear the stepping. Now, I believe that is coming from the fact that this is a MIDI controller controlling the filter, and therefore you've only got 128 steps of resolution in there, which unfortunately is just the case with a lot of ancient machines like this. This was from the very beginning of MIDI and implementation. So you do have MIDI in, out, and through over here, as well as step sequencer stuff, clock and tape in and out. A lot of the niceties of 1984. This is actually later as far as analog synths go. I believe that Roland stopped making analog synths, or at least new analog synths, around 1985. So this, along with the Chroma Polaris that we checked out last week, are both synthesizers from 1984, and they both suffered from not actually having the best marketing, and 1984 was a rough year to try to put out an analog synth because there was so much competition from the DX7 and other synthesizers that, you know, a sort of not as exciting analog synth from that era just didn't stick up or stand up as well in the market. But what's so cool about the synth is, generally speaking, to get a synthesizer that has SSM chips, it costs an arm and a leg. And these are still relatively reasonable. They haven't skyrocketed the prices of things like the Jupiter 6 and so forth. So yeah, really cool synth. Let's check out some more sounds. This one's called String. Turn it down a little bit. We can hear immediately part of the sound of this thing and the way that it works, and we'll dive in deeper after we've listened to some of the sounds later on in the stream into how to actually make your own sounds. Let me catch up with the chat real quick while I play a little bit more. This one's called High String. That is high. Ricky Magnum says $2,000 basically with shipping, non-functioning on Reverb. Totally not worth it. Love the look, but not worth it. I totally agree with that. You know, you shouldn't ever spend that much money on a synthesizer. And I will say the fact that these are so rare is the market on Reverb is like all over the fucking place with these guys. I will, by the end of the stream, I haven't had a chance to really play with this yet. So my mind is not made up on whether or not this is a great investment synth or something that's really worth justifying. I have a lot of synthesizers. At this point, I'm really not interested in collecting synths. I'm just interested in instruments that are good value and grab me in some way, make me feel something. So by the end of the stream, I think I'm going to have a better opinion on whether or not this is worth it. But $2,000 for a non-functioning synth is very silly. Dubstation Zero says, Tontec mods always seem to be done with respect of the synth as an enhancement, where Kiwi mods seem to want to make it a different machine. I agree with that. So the Tontec mod that's in this one really doesn't change a whole lot. It just gives you that extra little bit of control and stuff like that. And I think that's really awesome. I kind of want to get the AX60 Tontec modded as well, so it can help with the slider stuff. And it's similar where they're not adding a whole lot. The Kiwi 6, which is the Kiwi mod of the Polysix, there's all sorts of shit. There's like, you can do pitch envelope stuff that you couldn't do on the synth. There's a digital LFO. There's all sorts of sequences and arpeggio. Like, it gets to, like you said, where it's almost too much, maybe. J-Booth says this thing can do leads. It sounds very vibrant. Dubstation Zero says the sizzle of the SSM filters really comes through. 40 Thieves, who also has one of these, says you have to mess with it in 4 voice mode, and also pointed out that Maniac, the song Maniac, was built into this thing, which I think is hilarious. So yeah, one of the first things I wanted to point out actually is we'll just use the synthesizer real quick. We can move over to an ensemble here, and we can see that the ensemble is on. And we can just move it off if we want, so we can hear it without any chorus. So that ensemble's doing a lot. It's a analog chorus, BBD chorus, bucket brigade delay based chorus, and what's cool about it is it's more than your standard roll-in chorus in the sense that it's not just like one delay going left to right. There's some complexity in there. But the heartbreaking thing about the ensemble is we're sort of stuck with just on or off. There's no way to control it, so, you know, there's not any way to sort of use it to thicken up the synth other than if it sounds right to that particular sound. And you can hear how without that chorus, this synth can sound pretty bone dry. It sounds good. Don't get me wrong, it sounds good. The SSM chips. You get the warmth and everything, but you know, you've got to add something to it to give it that effect. So we'll get into some more of that later as we keep going. I love some of these. This first bank, we've got 6 banks of sounds. This one, bow cello. There's a lot of really great string sounds in this, which I appreciate. I love synth string sounds, so. Just a really cool synth cello sound. We got brass 1 here, so. And one thing, I think I'll do a video on this in the future, but I want to go over something real quick here. So this is brass 1. Really great, well, honestly pretty Oberheimy. Jim says he went to Guitar Center and tried out the Studio Logic Sledge too. I'd love to try that synth out sometimes. Seems like a really cool synthesizer. Jamie says, I think the Texas Instruments sort of nostalgia look kind of adds to the love for this one. Kind of reminds me of a Roland Juno 6. Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, this is a gorgeous synthesizer. The color of it and everything, the way they came up with it is great. And I know a lot of people will say, well, it's not one knob per function. But even though I have the one knob per function controller, it's honestly so easy and fun to dial in from the just from the interface. It's not that hard. Like I think it's still worth it and exciting in its present form. Here's another brass patch, and this one's interesting. So. I preemptively brought this patch up. As an experiment, I actually have my Kawai K3 over there. So this Kawai K3, I think I paid approximately 6 or 7 times less for that synthesizer than I did for this one. So think about that for a second, how much of a better value that is. K3s have gone up in value since I bought that one, so it's not a fair comparison nowadays. I would say in general, it's probably a fourth the price of a SX-240. I'm guessing you can get one of these. Usually, it sounds like not right now, but for around $2,500, and you could probably get a K3 for about $600. Last video I did looking at the prices, it was about $600. And what's interesting is the Kawai K3 has the same filter as this. It's the same, it's a very similar synthesizer actually under the hood. It's got analog filters and amplifiers just like this. Really the only difference is it's got velocity and aftertouch, which is nice. This one does not. And this has analog oscillators, that has digital oscillators, but the digital oscillators sound pretty good. So as an experiment, I just want to pull up real quick and ask you guys real quick, if everybody will do this for me, just hear me out, okay? What I want you to do is just close your eyes. Just don't watch the stream for a second. And I'm going to play both this synthesizer and the Kawai K3. And I want you guys to tell me what you think. So before you close your eyes, I'm going to play the move-in patch again. Okay, we've forgotten what this patch sounds like. All right, everybody close your eyes. I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds here, real quick. And I want you guys to tell me which one you think is the synth, which one's the analog synth, and which one has the digital oscillators. So synth A. Moving over to synth B. Go back to synth A real quick and see real quick. And synth B. Okay, so it's kind of silly, but you know, it's kind of fun to try these things. To my ear, they both sound surprisingly close, right? And so if you guessed B is the SX-240. I definitely probably shouldn't have played the patch beforehand because it did sort of clue you guys into the sound a little bit, just the differences. And to my ear, it's a little bit fatter, right? You know? Comparing that over here. You can try a different patch. There's a couple on the... Yeah, I'd say, you know, if I volume match it... They're close. They're not far off. And that's just the default patch on that synth. So these two patches are very similar between the synthesizers. And the Kawai K3 can do a whole lot that the SX-240 can't. Doesn't have analog oscillators. So for some people, that's just going to be, you know, that's the end of the conversation. They're like, I want an analog synth, right? And for me too, I like analog synths. I'm all about them. So, you know, but I wanted to do that comparison because I don't know that many people who have both the K3 and the SX-240. I want to do a deep dive comparison between the two. But anyways, that's just something interesting. Yeah, Jim says, I love Synth A. And I think that is that's the thing, is that Synth A sounds really good. And they have the same filter, and, you know, the sawtooth sound pretty similar. And the thing about analog synths from the 80s is VCOs versus DCOs today don't really matter that much. So synthesizers like the Prophet Rev 2, Behringer DeepMind 12, synthesizers like that can sound really good even though they have DCOs, because you can usually apply some sort of like slop or vintage function to it, which helps them drift in and out of tune. There was nothing like that in the 80s. So for me, I think that, you know, a digital oscillator, I noticed this with like the Alpha Juno, for instance, a digital oscillator versus an analog oscillator that's a DCO, they can sound very similar. And sometimes synthesizers like the DW8000 actually have darker, fatter, more warm sounding oscillators than their analog counterpoint like the Polysix. So just something to talk about a little bit there. Machine Storm says it's a little brighter and warmer. Yes. Jim says, to me, Synth A sounded clear and crisp. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I think the K3 is an amazing synthesizer. You guys, like, all day long, that's a synth that I will sing the praises of. Probably my #1 synth I talk about on this channel as far as value for vintage synths go. Crystal Love, how's it going? Welcome to the stream. So this one's called Dolby, and this is why. So that's all the voices stacked up. Next, we have some bass patches, so we'll get in here. Really great sort of, 80s synthwave. Great bass sound. We've got another one, digi bass. Kind of in the same neighborhood. Doghouse, this one's interesting. Thick. Can I get an amen? Now that is like shaking the cones in my headphones. That's crazy. Can you guys hear almost like a little bit of like a digital whine in there? I don't know if that's something to do with my signal chain coming in, but I can hear a little bit of something. Sometimes I'm hearing things while I'm watching the stream, and when I go back and watch it on YouTube later, I do not hear it. So even though I believe in general that YouTube's about the same. Can I get a cheers in the chat right now for everybody who hangs out on Scum Night every Wednesday? You guys are fucking awesome. I see we got a bunch of people here. Just want to say thank you for being the shit. And yeah, let's just keep going here, but cheers to all you guys. Can I get some cheers in the chat? Alcohol. Johnny, I didn't see you there earlier. How's it going, my friend? Let's see what's going on. But does it do organ sounds? We will get there. We'll see what's up. Pick bass. Oh, I think I played the same bass part twice. Yeah, this is another really good one. Got a little Inktomi reverb on there. This is called MIDI. Yeah, that sounds nice. That sounds thick. All right, we're moving on. We got a little bit of a trumpet sound here. Yeah, it's a trumpet. It's good. Oh, here's the one I was thinking of earlier when I saw Dolby Mushroom. This one's trippy. Wow, that's a sound, isn't it? That's something else for sure. 40 Thieves says that mushroom badge though. Yeah, it's a very cool synth, Johnny. Filter seems a little too open on these basses. Yeah, let's go back. MIDI was MIDI, right? This is pretty. Oh, Doghouse. But yeah, so we could just go in real quick. Get a little bit more, tune it up. Yeah, we could get some pretty cool sounds. Now, I have a question for anybody who actually has one of these synthesizers in the stereo-opping controller and the Tontec mod. If anybody watching this video in the future knows, my VCF EG amount doesn't change. So what you would think is that if I increase this, you would hear more of the envelope depth, right? But nothing happens. If I go over to the actual parameter on the synthesizer, EG here, then I can control this. Oh, I guess in this example, it's a bad example because it's already all the way up. All right, let's... So you can hear it's clicking. So why don't we turn it down in that case? So that now we're just hearing the filter with no envelope modulation going to that. So just stuck at that cutoff frequency, and I can't. Oh, whoops! I hit the key tracking. Whoa, whoa. Yeah, you can see that that knob's not doing anything, so I don't know why. It's hard to interface old synths with new technology, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's just something silly going on between that and this. It's not the end of the world, it's just one parameter. It seems like everything else works, but I wanted to ask in case anybody who knows more about this stuff than I do could weigh in on it, so yeah. So this jump patch is obviously the, you know, the jump, whatever. You know, that type of thing. I'm not even going to try to play it. I don't remember it off the top of my head. Birdland! Yeah, kind of a cool vowel-y. I think it's a cool Depeche Mode type lead. It's a little dark, but of course we could just add a little bit more to it just to kind of give it a little bit of something. I don't know. I mean, it's up to you guys what you like out of synthesizers. That patch is begging for more reverb. Yeah, so I try to split the difference. I actually have the reverb very low. It might sound like there's more, but it's just because you're listening to the reverb with silence in the background, so you can really just hear that tail keep going, but there's a very small amount of reverb. That way, the vintage synth snobs out there don't come at me and be like, why'd you put so many effects on it? That's just how the synth is, you know, but you need a little bit of something nowadays. Otherwise, a lot of vintage synths kind of sound like so bone dry and boring that, you know, they just, if you're a vintage synth person, you'll get it. You're like, okay, I just want to hear how the oscillator sounds, all of that sort of thing. But if you're a new person and you're just coming into the world of synthesizers, you might be like, that sounds like shit. That's like, it doesn't sound big and awesome and epic at all. So it's kind of, I'm trying to split the difference a little bit. And I like a little bit of effects on synths. Not like into super dry synth sounds anyways, so. My least favorite thing, a clavinet patch. Not least favorite, woo. Kind of sounds nice. 40 Thieves, this has a high pass filter, right? Yeah, so that's a cool thing that's built into this, is we actually have a high pass filter. Well, this is interesting. Wow. I was expecting this to be high passed. But there's actually no high pass filter in this sound, so that must mean that it is the pulse width of the oscillator. So let's go back over to this section over here and go find the, let's see here, the pulse width. How do I modulate that? Let's see. Pulse width. There we go. Okay, whoa, no, I didn't mean to do that. Wow, so you can take, it's basically on its narrowest setting. Right? But we could bring this down and turn it into a square wave. Right? right? So that's how you get that sort of sound and how you can create all sorts of sounds. I think a halfway point there, you can actually get a pretty decent like piano type tone out of a lot of synths. You need a little of that, and then what we could do is actually just bring down the filter. Increase the key amount. Just a little bit, and then go into the envelope here and just bring that up a little bit. But we need to change the decay, make it a little bit tighter, I think. There we go. We're still clavinetti. Maybe a little bit less EG, I don't know. Yeah, it's still a little thin, so I think I need to go back into the pulse width and bring that down even further. So that's like your sort of fake piano sound of the 80s. I'm not trying to say it sounds like a real piano, by the way. When I say strings or brass or piano, I'm talking about synth strings or synth brass or synth piano, not trying to make it sound like a real sample. I think it sounds pretty nice, though. Torben, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Yes, a Moog needs verb. Torben says, a really good synth does sound good without reverb. And this one certainly does, you know. But like I said, I'm trying to make it... I mean, some of it, too, is how does a synth sound in context of, you know, what it's going to end up like in a mix, you know? A lot of the times, the synth can sound amazing on its own. DW8000 is my favorite example of this. If you're familiar with that synth at all, it's incredible. Like, it sounds like spine-chillingly good. However, when you get to the mix stage, I spent a lot of time EQing it because it just doesn't blend in easy. It's like very far away, very dark. It sounds amazing on its own because it's full and warm and fat and just juicy. But when you listen to the mix, you're like, wow, it's almost like someone put a shelving filter on the high end and just stomped it out, you know? So it's one of those things for sure. Wah clavinet. Oh shit, you know, so we gain a little bit of this. I really hate that patch. This one's an electric piano. Love a little bit of amplitude modulation, so the LFO there is routed to the volume switch effectively, and it's giving it that wonderful... Oh, that's very nice. Very thick, very warm. Definitely something I would use. This thing just wants to buzz and sizzle. Dubstation Zero says, yeah, it's definitely got a lot of that to it. It's got a lot in there. You know, it's interesting. I'm still not sure. It's like the filter sounds good. The oscillators to me can sound a little dry. And I mean, some of that might be just in the neighborhood of the way these patches are. You really can't judge a synth too much by just the presets. So we'll get into kind of making some stuff as well later on. But, you know, it's a thing. Johnny says it sounds like a Fender Rhodes. Yeah, it's definitely in there. Jamie says it seems to have a Casio CZ tone. I don't know if that's an insult. I mean, those synthesizers were considered the low-end synths of the 80s, but nowadays, of course, people love those synths, so it's kind of a middle of thing. 40 Thief says, I have the stereoping controller in my VCF EG amount is working. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. I don't know if I should get in touch with Tontec or stereopping and try to figure that one out. So that's something. Bad Lux, welcome to the stream. This thing is warmer than a summer night. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting sort of like cross, like something to consider instead of something like a Juno 6 or something, because you've got the 2 oscillators plus a sub. So I think that's a big part of what the warmth of this synth comes from, is you're actually dealing with 3 oscillators essentially. Most synthesizers, analog synthesizers, particularly from the 80s, come in one of 2 configurations. One is an oscillator plus a sub, and the other is 2 oscillators. And the best example is the Juno 106 is an oscillator plus a sub. Juno GX3, or I'm sorry, Roland JX3P is 2 oscillators. Now, of course, you could drop the second oscillator down an octave and make it a square wave, and it's essentially the same thing as a sub. So those 2 oscillator synths are more flexible in the sense that you can get the same sorts of sounds out of them that you get from the single oscillator plus sub configuration, as well as doing actual detune. Now, what makes this powerful is you've got both in one. So the fact that you can turn all of those oscillators on at once, you can get quite a lot. So that's essentially like having 3 oscillators per voice, and this is an 8-voice synth. So to me, the fact that this synth is bitimbral, meaning you can play 2 synths at once, a lot of synthesizers are like that, but if they have 6 voices, which was sort of standard in the 80s, like the AX60 is like this, the Chroma Polaris is like this, where you could stack 2 sounds on top of each other. But kind of the thing that sucks about that is then you're limited to 3 notes, and that's really not enough to play a whole lot. Whereas in this case, 4 notes, 4 voices, right? That's like your Mini-Log XD. You can get away with that. I play a lot of 4-note chords. Right? And so the fact that you can stack 2 layers on top of each other, I actually think is quite powerful. This one's called the Flute. There's an interesting little LFO action going on in here. Do you guys hear that little clicking from the LFO? 40 Thief says, try putting the VCF cutoff pretty low and then moving the VCF EG amount. So let's try that real quick. This is a low patch anyways. I'm fascinated by that. And then if I increase the VCF EG amount, I'm getting nothing. But if I go on the synthesizer and increase the EG amount, yeah, so it's just for whatever reason this doesn't seem to be working out. Again, I'll probably reach out to stereopping first and then Tontec and see what's up with that. So Quadix says sounds like a Rhodes, yes. Torben says, I get that with the mix, but then again, reverb won't be the solution, but EQing. Reverb often washes away the character unless it's inbuilt effects like a DW or D50. Yeah, I agree with that. Torben says, I have a CZ1, which I want to hopefully get on this channel at some point. It was close to a DX7, has some pretty interesting sounds, especially since it's thin sounding, which is good in a mix. Yes. Definitely one of these days need to get his Casio. That's a big sort of omission. I mean, I have the HT6000, but to me that really wasn't a, you know, it was so close to being an amazing synth because it has those analog filters, but it just didn't come together for me in a way. Dubstation Zero says 3 full oscillators for the SQ1, SQ80. That is correct, and you can really get away with a lot with those oscillators. All sorts of things you can do with an SQ80 that's not possible with virtually any other synthesizer from that time. Walter asks, was the repair bill too bad on this one? It didn't have to be. It was pretty good. I needed to replace one of the signal outs was fucked up, just completely trashed and had to be replaced. I actually opted, these switches were starting to go. And so it was, I think, another $220 or so to get all of the switches replaced underneath. And they feel great now. They have just this wonderful, see if you can hear this. Can you guys hear these? Just a wonderful little click to them, and essentially return the synthesizer to being in mint condition. I think I probably still saved money. Like you'll probably, these things sell for a good amount, so I'll probably be okay. I'm not aware that this is a synth that will brick out on you, but like, which means that there's some part in it that once it goes, it's like done, right? So for me, I think it's a pretty good investment, but I will say this was a more expensive repair. I think it was pretty close to the most I've spent repairing a synthesizer, something, and you know, that's just part of buying vintage synths, right? You know, they're gonna get fucked up. It was kind of like this with the Alpha Juno. So the Ramiro from Sever Machines was like, I can put Aftertouch in it, but it's going to cost a lot. And you guys know that Alpha Junos don't go for that much. So I might have paid more in repairs and what I paid in the synth than what it's worth in some sense if I was to sell it right now. But, you know, hopefully in a few years the price goes up, justifies it, you know, sort of a thing. And with this synth and that synth, both of them, I was like, I just want to take this synth to being 100%, you know, like essentially brand new. I think that's worth a lot. You do see a lot of these on Reverb that are just mangled and trashed because there was less than 1,000 made, they say. So if it's made it 40 years, a lot of them got beat up. The fact that this one looks so good, aside from a little scrape that's just off camera there on the wood here, it's pretty much perfect. So I was like, you know what? It's probably worth putting a little bit more money in and just bringing this thing back to life. I love a vibraphone. I think I just heard some voice stealing, so yeah, so this is using the stacked layers, and you can kind of hear that. Not only is it louder, but it's also thicker versus the E piano sound, you know, versus you can hear that octave up, right? So that's probably the same patch, but just up an octave, and we can actually control that volume. Well, I don't really hear a difference there. But yeah, it's a beautiful patch, and we've only got 4 voices to work with. It's one of those things where, compared to the E piano patch where you can just kind of play as many notes as you want to be aware of it, because you could hear how I was sort of, you know, killed that low note. So, you know, you want to be cognizant of that, I suppose. So, oh, this one's beautiful. Ah, tender. I love that so much. We got a harpsichord here. That is what it is. Not a huge fan of clavinet or harpsichord sounds, and you guys know how I feel about organs. Oh, this is very cool, especially with the reverb. Not quite Blade Runner Blues harmonica levels, but it's... Yeah, it's definitely beautiful, but, you know, it's a thing. Let's see what else is going on in the chat here. Let me drink some more alcohol, too. Alcohol's so fucking cool. Nothing wrong with not drinking, though. So let's see what's up here. Crystal Love says, Yamaha PSS 460, love it for the chip I got. And for real, the Minilog XD is lovely. I agree. Torvin says, sometimes I think the sub on a Polysix or Juno 60 are different to a second oscillator, having more oomph and phasing. Or is that only imagination? Well, first off, imagination is worth a lot when it comes to buying vintage synthesizers. Being fucking delusional has gotten me quite far with the vintage synth game. But seriously, there might be some differences, but in theory, here's the theory. The way a sub-oscillator works is every time that first oscillator completes a cycle, it's actually just a switch that flips up, and then when it completes another cycle, it flips down. And if that sounds familiar, because it's a square wave, so it's up and then down, up and then down. So in theory, a sub-oscillator really is a slaved square wave down an octave or down 2 octaves. It works the same way. It just waits 2 cycles before it swaps or switches up, and then 2 cycles and then it goes down. So in theory, and I mean like on the Polysix, you can hear, I mean it's off camera here, but I can turn it on real quick and kind of illustrate this point if you want while we're hanging out. That's kind of the nice thing about having a bunch of synthesizers in the room, is if I'm going to just pick a patch here, turn this off, sort of reset the synth. Sorry, it's off camera, but it's just to make the point real quick. Let's open this up. And let's turn off the LFO here. So we got a sawtooth wave. Let's put it over to the square wave, so, right? And then down an octave is. Now, I can take the pulse width all the way up on that so we hear nothing. I'm playing something but you're not hearing anything. And then that's the sub oscillator. And then if I go back, that's the regular oscillator. And now we'll go back to just the sub oscillator. I mean, to me, it's pretty similar on the Polysix. I would say that it's pretty much a square wave. If anything, the sub actually sounds a little quieter than the oscillator, so that maybe they're not the exact same mix in terms of that. But it could be too that what you're hearing is actually the fact that the sub oscillator sort of reinforces the sound when you have it kicked in, whereas if you had like 2 square waves, you would just be hearing square waves. I don't know if that makes any sense. But anyways, just wanted to say that while we're hanging out and talking about things. Tokyo Scarab, welcome. Danger Guitar Mods, welcome. Danger says, the fact that you like the instrument justifies the repair costs. Yeah, I think some instruments are worth it. This is a piece of history, less than 1,000 made. The fact that I could repair it and get it up to really being 100% basically mint, I think is worth something in this particular case. Just for myself, if nothing else. Like, I did some good in the world. Cheap Panda says, Kawai didn't make much of anything, but what they made kicks butt. I do agree. How you doing, Tokyo Scarab? Jay Booth says, this shines for me in the strings, bells, and high mid vibes. I agree with that very much. Dubstation says, it's so ironic that the ad I always get watching this is Andrew Wang talking about the #1 plugin of the year. In Modular, you can always use an analog clock divider as a sub-oscillator generator. Never really thought of that. Conversely, you can speed up an analog clock to audio rate and get a square wave. So that's pretty crazy. Yeah, less than 1,000 is something. So we got some piano sounds. Let's go ahead and jump on in here. drag piano. Love this one. Go down the octave to make it fair. Bring up the volume. It's got that wonderful honky-tonk sort of sound, you know? Really great. Roses, this is the one I started off with, which I just think's, you know... notes. Oh, I love this patch. This one I've got a sample. It's just so... something about it that just grabs my heart right away. That's what you really want out of a synthesizer, right? It's just something that inspires you to play. I'm buying what that's selling, for sure. So, steel drum. What's life without a steel drum? 40 Thieves, I'm assuming that's using the brass effect. Let's go look. So brass is on. So this is interesting. Little detail about this synthesizer is that it has this brass effect, which I believe is just ring mod. So if we turn that off, let's hear how the sound sounds. That is a gorgeous sound, actually, without it. Why you would turn the ring mod on and make it sound so much less gorgeous. I love it without the ring mod. With it on, it's kind of cool for like if you wanted one sound, like a techno percussion sound, and you wanted to just... like, that's cool, right? Something like that, that sort of use for it. I don't know what you guys think. If you guys have a good... like, if someone can give me a good reason to use ring mod, I would appreciate it, because... there's all sorts of circumstances where I like ring modulation, but it's usually like slower, like, you know, where you can hear it, versus once you get into audio rate, and specifically I'm saying like fixed ring mod. I mean, on the Chroma Polaris we were checking out ring mod, but you could kind of control it a bit. Here you just, I don't know, it's definitely a sound. Jamie says, let's get to creating a patch. Okay, I can do that. Dubstation Zero says the Roland DCO actually uses clocks to generate their basic waveforms. I didn't know that. That's cool. Let's see here. Torben says, when you think of a waveform derived from the same oscillator, it's a different result than two non-synced oscillators octaves, at least on a Juno. I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about that. I am no expert when it comes to these things, so I'm not going to even pretend like I have any idea. Okay, so why don't we kind of make a patch? This actually isn't a bad one to start with. So let's just open up the filter. Now, I've got a few different settings here. Let me make sure. So, really all I think is going on is the LFO. Let's go ahead and see here. The LFO for DCO1. Let's see. And then we got that auto bend. Where the fuck is that auto bend at? I know it's around here somewhere. Do you know? Bender? Let's sing it. Upper hold portamento split. Where is that guy hanging out at? We got the attack, decay, sustain, release, high pass filter ensemble. Let's go ahead and make sure the ensemble's off. Yeah. Yeah, it's just controlling the filter for the bender. Let's see here. Keyboard assign. We could take it through the different modes, so we could have all of the oscillators be stacked in mono mode. Which sounds nasty. We've got polyphonic with 4 voices, meaning you've got 2 layers stacked. We've got polyphonic 8, so that's kind of your standard like 8 voice affair. Yeah, so those are our different modes. Man, mono sounded thick. Oh, happy I kind of stepped across that. Wait. Okay, so how do I find... Let's turn portamento all the way off. Something in there's weird. I don't know what the issue is. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this... That's the Sub Oscillator. We've got a noise source we could increase. It's pretty subtle in there, actually. I'm surprised. DCO2 is on. We can turn it off. Now we're hearing just the noise and the... Go ahead and turn that down, though. Oh, there's auto bend. It's right there. It was in front of me the whole time. Okay, so we finally kind of set ourselves up with something more or less like a initialized patch that we can work from. So that's good, but it's kind of a fun experience there. Let's see here. Let's see. It's a pitch attack envelope. Yeah, so that's what auto bend is doing. Might as well get that across. So with it off, here's how this sounds. Let's turn all the way up, 99, so you guys can hear what auto bend does if you're not familiar with it. Oh, it's interesting. If I play multiple notes, you don't really hear it, but if I play one at a time... You hear that sort of thing in like modern EDM quite a bit, but it was used... I'm surprised it's so fast. A lot of times auto bend you can get like really slow portamento-like effects. But I guess because you have portamento, you can control that. So while we're here, if I go to portamento, we can actually use glissando. And I forget where the button is. We'll get there later. We'll talk about glissando. That's fine. So let's go up to the sawtooth here. We can turn it all the way off. I wonder if you guys can hear this. I can hear some bleed of the square wave on my left ear. Let me turn the gate off here. Can you guys hear that? Just interesting. A little bit of old... it's in there. Even though all the oscillators are off, you can still kind of hear it, which is funny. So anyways, let's turn the sawtooth back on. And then we can go to DCO2, turn that on. Now, what's interesting about that, let's go back to the sawtooth and turn it off. All right, so 40 Thieves, DCO2, I only see controls for coarse fine tuning. So is DCO2 always a square wave? Is that what I'm supposed to intuit from that? Actually sounds very nice, by the way. Death by Media, welcome to the stream. How's it going, my friend? Yeah. That square wave sounds really great. So anyways, we want to turn DCO2 off for a second. So I can still hear it. We can have the sawtooth on, or we can turn that off and turn the pulse on. And we've got a couple of choices. We could have it in pulse width mode, which right now is... Oh, this is really interesting. Okay, so if I have the pulse off, I don't hear anything except for the little faint noise. Pulse width. What's interesting about that is even with the value all the way at the lowest amount, it's not a square wave, it's a pulse wave. Right? Like you can hear how much more narrow that sounds than if I turn that off and turn the square wave on. It's the same wave, just the duty cycle is different. So usually on a synthesizer, you can go smoothly between square wave to pulse wave, but it doesn't seem like you can do that there. Yeah, so very interesting. Terrell Lane, welcome to the stream. How's it going? So yeah, so immediately this is getting quirky in the oscillator section because you can't have two sawtooth waves, or in fact, even a square wave and a sawtooth wave, and you can't have two square waves, two sawtooth waves, or even two pulse waves. You have to have a saw, a square, and a pulse. They're like always different. So let's go ahead and turn that back off. Go back up to the pulse wave here. Turn the, and move it over to pulse width modulation. And see. And it's almost close enough to take us through to 0, but it doesn't. What that means is that there's no point where the sound stops at the top of the frequency spectrum. It sounds really great. Now let's go add the sawtooth in, because on its own, that's a very thin pulse width modulation sound. It's not really like the Chroma Polaris or the Polysix or anything where you get that like thick, warm harmonics. It's very thin, but I'm hoping with the sawtooth wave we get some... Well, what's a little heartbreaking is the sawtooth wave is so bright that the pulse width, you really don't really get it. Versus if I turn this off, right? Doesn't sound that much different, just sounds louder. I mean, it's thick. It's there, but, you know, it's a... You hear it on, like, one note more. Wow, 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 wow. Zozilla the Great, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Don't worry about being white. Nothing wrong with that. Death by Media says... Early VSE days had me eyeing the SX-240 for a long, fruitless time. How's the keyboard on those, Kawai? Well, I think the keyboard feels great. Really great for the era. I've played on a lot of shitty 80s keyboards, and this one feels good. There's no velocity or aftertouch, though, so that's a lot of the times where it really kind of comes in for me, is where I feel that, like, being able to make the keyboard weep with emotion as you play. Well, that's not really happening here, so that's a thing for it, but it feels good. Autumn, have a wonderful night. I love you. Get some extra sleep. I love sleep. Sleep is so fucking cool. Take care, okay? I love you so much. How would you rate the SX versus the K3? I think I'm going to have to play around with the synth more by the end of the stream, I will give you an answer. I don't mean to be doing that to make you hang around the whole time. It's not the goal. I genuinely don't know. I hope I can figure it out because, and like I said earlier in the stream, I might even do a whole video comparing the two because it's hard. They are very similar. And there's a part of me that's like, maybe this is just, aside from how beautiful it looks, one thing is that this might not be obvious to everybody who doesn't have both synths, but the K3 is much easier to program. This isn't bad, but you have to sort of step through things here. On the Kawai K3, you just press the button, go, press the button, go, right? So it's really fast. The K3 has a great interface and sounds great. Same filter, same amplifiers. The chorus is fully, like, there's a bunch of different settings you can do with this. With this, we've only got one setting, right? That kind of sucks. You know, like, there's a few things about this synth that make me go, huh, you know, it's like kind of it fills that like Juno type sound to it, right? But I wouldn't say it's quite doing the Jupiter thing to justify the extra price. I don't know. It's one thing I can say, I think, and even listening to you guys this stream, I feel like a lot of you are like, yeah, it sounds fat, right? Like it does. So that's that. Why don't we turn the sub oscillator on now? So let's see how fat we can get now. That's very good. Do we have a second? No, so we can't drop it down a second octave either, so. What I can say is for the price of these guys, assuming they go for about $2,500 nowadays, there are better synths. Like for what this synth can do, I would go Polysix over this probably every day because it's the same filter and I just love the way the Polysix sounds. This does technically have a stereo ensemble chorus. The Polysix doesn't. That synth has a chorus, a phaser, and an ensemble, but it's all mono. So it's a little bit of a trade-off there. But honestly, this ensemble chorus is not my favorite because it's not adjustable. There's no way to really do it. For whatever reason, on the Rolands, that's not a problem. Like on the JX3P, Junos, they just kind of sound right. With this one, the ensemble is very swirly. So let's turn it on. I think it'll sound good with this because we're just feeding it a shitload of raw waveforms. Does it though? One thing is the chorus is extremely present. It's almost a lot of choruses from this era didn't have any regeneration or feedback in it, which is where you add more delay to it. This one seems to have more of that type of sound. I don't know if that's exactly what's happening, but you really can hear the peak moving, which almost takes it into... So it does the string machine thing great, right? That does sound... But I just wish there was some, you know, like in this example, I prefer the thickness of those raw waveforms, and then I'd use something like my plugin Inktomi and just mix in a little of that, so here you guys can hear how this sounds. You know, it's like less, you could maybe dial it back and just kind of get it in kind of nice here. Something like this. So you still got the thickness, whereas if I was to, you know, again, just use the ensemble built in here. It sounds sounds good, but you're just sort of stuck in a certain lane, right? Yeah, so let's see here. Zozilla the Great says, sounds like my Farsifa. Yeah, absolutely, it does have that sound. Death by Media says, too much, yep. Torben says, it sounds like the ensemble on the Polysix. I agree, but this is more extreme, I think. A little bit more, for better or worse. I wouldn't care if it was just dialed back a bit, but because it is so forward, it doesn't work on everything. And in this example, I don't think it would be my go-to. But what also is tough, and correct me if I'm wrong, 40 Thieves, but without that ensemble effect on, there's almost no way to make this synth stereo, which is kind of the whole point in a way. So again, that's kind of like there's pros and cons about this synth. There's pros and cons about every synth, by the way. I'm a very critical person. I'm an asshole. I'm just very mean, and I know that there's like a lot of people who would like kill to have a synthesizer like this. And like I said, it is legendary. It is an honor and a privilege to have it in the room. So when I talk about it in a way of like, well, you know, I don't want anybody to think I don't love the opportunity to play this synthesizer. Like for me, this is like a dream come true synth, especially because I'm such a Kawai fan. It's probably my favorite synthesizer company, vintage synth company. I just think they made the most interesting synths from that period. But I also sometimes have to put on my cap and recognize it's not all about me, and I am talking to people. You guys who are in the chat right now, you guys, we all hang out every Wednesday night at 9. You guys get my general vibe. But there's a lot of people who watch my videos, like these live streams afterwards, who don't necessarily get the benefit of the day in and day out, week in and week out with me, to sort of see what I mean by some things. And so I do feel a certain responsibility to be transparent and honest about the limitations of some synthesizers. You know, this synth does not have a lot that a lot of other synths have in this price range. You don't have VCOs, you don't have a way to detune the oscillators in mono mode at all. You've got a fixed ensemble chorus. It sounds good for string machine type stuff, but it's kind of always going to sound like a string machine. It's not as flexible as like a roll-in chorus. The thing about like that, the way DCO2 and DCO1 work, I don't know, it's just interesting. And so I wanted to be, you know, completely forthright with you guys. I'm sorry if I'm on a bit of a rant there. So let's see here. Chi says, it sounds as full as cake frosting. Like a complete flavor but not a complete taste. That is true. Torben says you got to add a small stone phaser to it, and the red carpet is there. Well, I do have a small stone right behind me, so we could maybe even do that. Let's see here. Dub Station says compare it versus the Boss CE. That's a really good point. Running this into something like the Boss CE pedal, that would be a very good thing to do. Mighty Pinto, how's it going, my friend? Welcome to the stream. Just checking out synths as usual. Let's see. Torben says, yes, that's what the roll-in chorus are just great for. Always work if you can overhear the noise, for sure. Zozilla asks, why did Kawai stop doing stuff? Let's see. Yeah, no arpeggiator. We do have a sequencer, though, so that helps make up for that. Kawai was making synthesizers through the 80s. They really shifted into doing more digital stuff. So the K3 was their first synthesizer that was a hybrid synth in 1986. So 2 years after this, they basically went into the Kawai K3, which is almost the same architecture, but with digital oscillators, much more flexible synth, velocity aftertouch, variable chorus, all good things. This synth, then they went on to make the Kawai K1 in 1987 or 88. Sorry, I don't have the date right off the top of my head. But that was their first all-digital synth. And then the K4, K5, those all came out. Or K5 might have come out earlier. The dates are a little wonky. But anyways, the point is they went really in on digital. Then in 1997, they tried their hardest to make the greatest synthesizer of all time, the Kawai K5000S. I've done a video on it. It is an impressive synth, but it didn't sell very well. And I think part of it is because additive synthesis, which is what that synth was based off of, is confusing and hard and difficult to program. And I think just people weren't into it at the time, and it just didn't take off. And it's a shame because at that point, Kawai was like, all right, fuck synths. They sell high-end pianos. So they were like, yeah, okay, we're hanging up the hat. But it's a shame because while they were making synths, I think they made some of the coolest synths of the 80s, 90s, and 70s. So anyways, let's see. Let's go here. Check up with this. I appreciate it, Jay Booth. Yeah. Yeah, so Zilla, no, they still make high-end pianos and also like digital pianos. So you could go on Sweetwater right now and get Kawai products, but they don't make synthesizers anymore. So let's see here. Zilla says it's strange because the market's reviving. I know. I would suck a lot of dicks to get them to get back in the game if that would be at all possible. So we can then, you know, add some cutoff from the filter. So we can have more of like a plucky type sound. That sounds fat. So that's the one thing I will say about this synth versus the Kawai K3. What I'm starting to pick up on is this has an almost Moog-like clarity to it, where the top end is just there all the time, but so is the low end. So it's almost got a very modern, scooped, might be a little extreme of a word to use, but I mean, doesn't that sound fat, right? You know, to me, maybe that's the little bit of extra magic that this thing has. Is that you've got that extra, just that extra little amount of ass. I don't know. Sometimes it grabs me. Sometimes it grabs me, for sure. Terrell saying something about hating this generation. Let's see. Yeah, so we've got this sound. Now what we can do with this, we've got a really fat sound here. Can we detune this? Yeah, so DCO2 can be fine-tuned. So we actually had it up +4. So this is it just all together. And this synth has digitally controlled analog oscillators, meaning that the tuning is going to be perfect. Still analog oscillators, but the tuning is perfect, so they don't waver in and out at all. So we have to add that in. We can do that in one of two ways. We can either use the LFO to affect the pitch, which is cool. Or we can do it just by detuning the oscillators. The thing about detuning a digital or a DCO oscillator, though, is it's going to be a very predictable phasing versus on VCO synths, you get this more wandering type of phasing, which is, you know, better. I'll just say it's better. So that's +10. Let's try +20. Am I stupid? Oh, it's not +20 cents. This is probably about 15 cents at 50. I'm not hearing any fucking difference. Oh, DCO2 is off, that's why. I was like, what is going on? How could that be? Oh, you can even tune it negatively, so. Thank God. I was like, am I fucking losing it? So, once again, here's the sound. And if we do tune it +5, that's good. Those notes weren't, though. There's a fucking spider just coming at me. Where the... I've never seen a spider in this room before. It's like a fucking... Is that a fucking... What do they call those things? The really spooky ones. The one that are, like, fucked up. Not a widow, but the... Not a wolf spider. What do they call those spiders? I don't know. I'm going to try to catch it. All right, buddy. I'm going to catch you on this bill. Come on. Nope. Come on. Yeah, come on. Right onto the paper. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Go ahead, buddy. Okay, I got the spider. Oh, he fell. Come on. Yeah, come on, buddy. There we go. All right, guys. What kind of spider is this? Can you guys see this? Let me go move it. Can you see that on that? What kind of fucking spider is that? What do they call those things? They're like fucked up, right? Like if they bite you, you're like fucked forever, I think. I've never seen one of these before. I know they're in Florida. So we are going to open this door and let this spider go. Come on, no, get off. There we go. There you are, buddy. Okay. Go be free in Lake Worth with the rest of the fucking horrible shit out there. Sorry for the fucking derailment there. That sounds good. It's a good amount of detune. Let's try 10 cents of detune. So, one of the problems with detune with DCO synths is they start because the predictability of the phasing is so it's like it starts to sound out of tune quicker than the VCO synths do. So like 5 cents sounds great. If I take it to 10, we start getting a little seasick, which could be great for like down in the bass section. It can be nasty. Like, that's sick. We've got all the animals here. Lemon's here. Hey, Lemon. You want to say hi to... You just missed the spider. Hey, Lemon. So here's Lemon, the blind cat. Okay, I'll put you down. So this stream is going crazy here. Let's see here. We catch up with the chat. Cellar spider, that's not what it is. Wolf or bishop spider. There's a scorpion by her foot. That's fucked up. I thought you were in Canada, Aquatic. Brown recluse. That's it, Death by Media. Points. Yeah. Torben says, it looks like a house spider. It probably was just a harmless house spider, but it was kind of fun to, you know, go for the, yeah. Death by Media says, 13 bites from a necrotizing spider, probably a recluse, still healing 3 months later. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I think that's a thing. Like, if a recluse gets you, it's like that flesh is just gone. It's just fucked. 13 bites, that's intense, my friend. I'm glad you're still here. Oh my god. Oh, you were on vacation in Curacao, I see. Yeah, now if I take this up to 15... we're really losing it. And we can take that all the way up to 50. Which is just, why did they even make this a parameter? It sounds terrible. Honestly, most of the goodness is going to happen like 5, 6, 7. This is 7. 7's tolerable. For this example, though, I'm going to dial it back. I'm going to leave it on +4. So, pretty tight tuning. There's not necessarily the range. But what we can do is actually apply some pitch bend from the LFO. I think that'll be more useful. So let's add some from the LFO. We can get that pretty extreme. So this is at 99%. Pretty useless, but if we dial that back, combination of the LFO adding a little bit of vibrato, very small amount, plus the detune. We can go back and maybe even fucking fuck the tuning up just a little bit more. Just, you have to be careful. I'm seeing values of 5 or less with the detune and the LFO are useful. To my ear, that's right on the edge. I think that's 5 and 5 on both of them. 5 and 3. I'm not even using 5. 5 and 3. If I do 5 and 5, it's too much. It's seasick. But 5 and 3. That sounds really great. And now I'm not mad at the character of the synth, you know, being too predictable. It actually sounds really good and warm and analog, and it doesn't sound too digital and perfectly tuned, you know. Yeah, so let's see. Aquatic Borealis says, hope you never get bit by a botfly. That's a horror movie. I've never heard of that. Absurd TV, welcome to the stream. How's it going? I'm glad you like classic synth. So do I. Yeah. Death by Me, it says, like, using the LFO and the Ensoniq for detune or PWM, very small increments. Yes. So, now I'm assuming, man, it's right on the edge. It's almost too much. I'm going to go back up to the detune and dial it back 1 or 2. Yeah, so 4 and 3 sounds good. It's almost Hoovery. Because you got that sub-oscillator in there too. So that's good. Let's go check out the LFO real quick. So we can control the speed. We can slow that down a bit too. That'll help smooth it out. For this example, I will increase the LFO just so you can hear. So just, you can take this very slow. Let's see how slow we can take it. That's a very slow LFO. So yeah, that's pretty extreme. I'll dial that way back down so it's not so annoying, but I want to hear, I'm going to turn off DCO2 real quick and the sawtooth wave. Whoopsie, I'm losing control of my life. And you can hear that the LFO being slower has also affected the pulse width modulation. So it's the same LFO controlling the pulse width modulation as the detune. So that's something to be thinking about. Mighty Pinto says, yeah, crank. So we can turn these back on now. A little bit of, you know, sexiness in here. So let's go back. Let's see. So one thing we can do is we can add a delay. Oh, this actually already has a delay. So this is it with the LFO kicking in immediately to create vibrato. But we could actually have that delay. Let's set it to the max delay. So what we should be hearing is just the waveforms with just a little bit of chorusing or beating from the detune. And then as I hold the chord, the vibrato should come in. For this example, I'll increase the vibrato a bit just so you can hear it. Yeah, so that's how that sounds. I think that's useful. I like a lot of the times when I'm doing sound design, here would be a pro tip for anybody. I don't like using LFOs all that much. I like a nice subtle LFO, but the delay is makes an LFO much more useful to me because I like the sound to be sort of dominated by the envelope, whatever's going on with that to the filter and the amplifier. And then once it's done doing its thing, like if it's, you know, opened and closed or whatever, then it's just sort of static. That's where I want the LFO to come in to sort of break up that staticness. But sounds that are more based around the LFO, I'm not as much of a fan of. So we've got a pretty good thing. We can also check out real quick here. The LFO has different shapes. Oh, that's kind of cute. It's got, I don't know, well, you guys can see that. It's like little squares, and then triangle, and then little sawtooth waves. It's so cute. So that's a thing. And then you can also reverse the LFO. So that's probably useful for, say, like a sawtooth, a reverse sawtooth wave. So why don't we go ahead and experiment with that. So we turn the cutoff all the way down. And we'll turn the EG off for now to the amount that the envelope generator is affecting that. So we're just hearing that sound. So the cutoff is static now. There's nothing affecting that other than maybe some key following. But what I want to do is run the LFO over to the cutoff frequency so we can really hear it. And the LFO to DCO1, we can bring the... That sounds very nice, actually. That sounds good, right? And that's with no resonance. That sounds, I'm into that. So now we can really hear like the different shapes here. So the delay, let's turn the delay all the way off so it just starts immediately. And we can check different waveforms. So we have it on triangle, which would be sort of your standard like Polysix. Most synthesizers has a triangle LFO, and then they get more complicated from that, but the default would be that. Let's move it over to square wave. This is really interesting because it is not a hard square. It's actually rounded off, so it's like a kind of halfway between, say, a triangle or a sine wave and a square, and it sounds really musical. One of the things about some digitally controlled LFOs from the 80s is they have this like really sharp, horrible, clicky sound to them, but not this one. Versus the triangle wave. Oh wait, triangle wave. You can hear the difference there. I keep pressing that button. Let's hear the sawtooth wave. So this almost has like a pumping sort of... So now we get actually, and then I think if I go to reverse here, that just changed that to being the opposite. Now a down shape, which should sound more like a pluck. So you can hear it again. It's not a sharp sawtooth. There's a good amount of slew in there or something smoothing out the edges. So it's very nice sounding. Not perfect for certain types of sounds though. Like I often like to use a sawtooth LFO to sort of generate the sound of additional plucks. It can be really cool if it's sort of in and out of time with whatever you're playing. I think I did that on the monopoly where you could get these like really cool sort of polyrhythms occurring by using sawtooth as well as a plucky envelope shape. Sort of getting like two different sounds at once. With this, you're not going to get that. You're going to get a very pretty sound without something to compare it to. Instead of hearing, you get sort of like a wow instead of ow, if that makes any sense. God, I hate myself. So let's see here. Death by Me says, was just looking at the service manual. I think there is a trimmer pot for the ensemble, but not 100 as it's a pad Xerox on my tiny phone screen. So you never know. Let's see here. Torben says, filter sweeps with an LFO can sound more interesting than envelopes. Sure. I do agree with that. Yeah, so it is the OG side chain, Walter, but this wouldn't be as good as some other synths for that sound like that. Because it is just like a little something. But anyways, this is super cool. So we've got a start and a disable section, so I can disable the LFO. I haven't ever seen that on a synth before. You can just turn the LFO off at will over here, which is pretty cool. And you also have a start thing. So what that can do is you can force it, and this would be really useful if you're using this live and you need that LFO to be in time with the song, right? You can force that LFO to start on time. It looks like my LFO, it doesn't look like it's working. Well, well, shit. Oh, wait, I think I see. So you have to turn it off first. Wow, that's interesting. So you have to have it in disable mode, but then oh, I see. So you could wait, let me see if I can be not stupid about this. I was trying to see if I could start it and then take disable off, but it doesn't seem like it. It seems like you're sort of stuck with it. So I guess that's a thing. Have a great night, Zozilla. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you next time, okay? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anyways, interesting stuff. I don't really know the point of like disabling it and then starting it again. Because you have to keep your finger on it, which to me, I'm like, then I don't have a hand to play. So what's the point? But anyways, they put it there. If someone like watches this video later and can explain to me what the purpose of that is, let me know. I'd get it if I was hoping it was like a re-trigger where it would like force it to start whenever you pressed it, but it only seems to start it from disable mode. I don't know. Very interesting. I'm not gonna go into that. So anyways, let's go back to the LFO and add just a little bit more. And then going up to the cutoff, we'll use a little bit less, so it's less extreme. And then we'll go into the waveform here, set it to triangle. So I'm just trying to, right now, I'm trying to make like the most awesome sound, or like the most like thick sound. Maybe not most awesome, but just all the oscillators are on. There's, the LFO's going to detune, or to add some vibrato, plus we have detune. Now we're adding some sound to the voltage controlled filter. And then we can add a little bit of EG intensity. And I want to have as much as I can. Sounds great. So now what I can do over here is I can actually, let's see, I could have been doing all of this from this controller, but a lot of the times for these streams I like doing it just kind of raw. And then let's go see what's the VCF attack is the blue one here. So I want to add some delay to that. So this is, we can get really tight with this envelope, by the way, which is great. Some people, depending on the synth, sometimes it's like, I just looked over the Jax 3P. I gave it the side eye, where it's like, it's not always the best synthesizer, but that is a very snappy envelope. That's great. So, but I want to create like a really long sweep. And then add add some resonance so we can really start to hear this. Well, you're really long. I need to add some release, and I need to add some release to the amplifier too, so now we can really... Wow. This thing's got a long release time if you want it to be there. Bring that sustain all the way down on these guys too. Keep the sustain up there. A little bit of attack to the amplifier just to take the front end off. Take the resonance down even a little bit less. Really kind of coming into that analog. So sort of like an analog string sound. Let's add a little bit more decay, and we need to go into the LFO and just disable that. It's getting annoying to me. I want it to be a little bit more strict. Or we could add a delay to the LFO, but for now we'll just... We're getting there. We're getting there. Going to get that. Touchy, the decay knob's touchy. Yeah, it's definitely, it can sound really good. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think? This is one of those synths that has a very touchy resonance. J-Booth says it reminds him of the Korg Poly 800. Again, like, I'm kind of like, oh God, you know, like Poly 800 is one of the really great value, $400 analog vintage synth from Korg from 1986 or 7, something in there. So, you know, if you're getting that sort of territory with this expensive as a synth, it doesn't you know, sound great. Well, less resonance though, when we bring it down, it can sound really fat. To me, it is giving me more of that Juno-y type sound with the DCOs than I'm getting Polysix. Like the Polysix warmth that's more over there. But what I do like from this is the clarity. The clarity is there. Now let's go ahead and add that ensemble in. Oh, the high pass filter's been on this whole time? I'm so stupid. Okay, let's turn that off. It's not that different, but down there you can hear the difference. J Booth is saying the synth is, the Kawai is way thicker and more versatile. Well, of course, yes. I don't get me wrong. I wasn't saying anything against you. I was just meaning more like, you know, you want a synth like this to really stand out because it is one of those legendary synths and it's rare and it's expensive. So, you know, Torben was asking me, like, what's my opinion on it? So I feel like we're kind of, you know, coming up on 11 p.m. here. I kind of got to commit to it at some point. Let's check out how the chorus sounds with it. I really don't like the chorus. I'm going to just come out and say it. Let's turn that off. Let's go to Inktomi. Inktomi has an ensemble mode. Let's just turn a little of that on and do the same chords. Let's add a little bit more in so you guys can really hear it. Am I crazy? I think my plugin sounds better. Let's go ahead and turn the ensemble back on. I shouldn't say better. This has a very different sound. It's very bright, actually. You can hear that wonderful 80s chorus noise, but I actually quite like that. It actually sounds great. I should say that. It does sound great. The more I listen to it and I get used to it, I'm like, okay, it is great. It's really great for what it's trying to do. The only problem is everything you put through it sounds like that. And when you turn it off, it's so different. Like, I like this sound that I made because I like the fatness. And then now it's like flat ass, no twerk. It's good. It's just so different that it's frustrating, I guess, is what it is. Like, there's times where I want that ensemble chorus sound, and I'm like, oh yeah, immediately, you know, I want that sort of a thing. But let's go back to Inktomi. I'm going to turn it all the way up. That gives you immediately that sort of string machine ensemble, and then that to me retains the fatness, the warmth, and the analog character that I just am not getting from the analog chorus. I don't know. I go back and forth on that. Terrell, have a great night, okay? I hope to see you soon. Let's see. Death by Me, it says, it has a good tone, but it won't work out of its own pocket. Yeah, I agree with that. It's close. So yeah, let's talk about, what do I think about this synthesizer? Well, I got a few more sounds here. Let's run through them real quick. Ah, the organs. I know some of y'all were waiting for them. It's actually not a terrible organ sound. See, this tremolo, you just immediately, you can hear that ensemble chorus is on, so that's what that sound sounds like. You know, jazz organ. I actually like these organ sounds quite a bit. Cathedral. Shift pipe. Pipe organ. Oh, we got a choir sound. Sounds good. Chime. Ow. Phase strings. This is for my boy Jim Abbey. I know he likes a phase string sound. Now that is beautiful. That is beautiful. Wow, that's a really special sound. We got 2010. Wow, that's a lot of modulation. Really talky with the filter too. That's a very cool patch. Still going. Space chirp. We got this one called Space. Very cool. UFO. We got one called Squares. Out of place in this bank because it's just a beautiful square sound. Echo. I think the gates on this, let me disable the gates on this, just so you guys can really hear this one. Let's see. go. You have to like kind of hit it and then release. Very cool. Kenya, how's it going? Good to see you. How have you been? Cool. This one's called Modulate. Basically the perfect synthwave sound. You just, that's the whole synthwave song right there. Just I mean, it's an entire synthwave song right there. It's all you need. It's just one patch and some drums and you're done. So yeah, definitely interesting. Okay, so let's talk about this synth. Obviously there's a lot more that still needs to happen, you know? Hey, wait a second. Let me look over here real quick. Oh, you can control the trigger of this. So you can force the trigger of the LFO to when the keys start. That's actually very cool and very useful for this type of sound. I'm surprised that wasn't on by default. Those were bad notes. Anyways, okay, so let's summarize here. Polysix, welcome to the stream. Good evening. Off topic, but I picked up a Korg DW6000 for 250 bucks. That's awesome. Would like to restore some areas where the paint came off. Any ideas on how that could be done? Airbrushing. That's a great question, and unfortunately, my friend, I have no good answers for you. So you're missing some paint. For one thing, consider this. I quite like synthesizers that have some battle scars. I think the patina looks nice. So depending on how bad it is, maybe don't be in a rush to necessarily change it. Sometimes synths look cool with a little bit of damage. They look cool when they're super clean and pristine like this one, and then they look cool when they've got some battle scars, so consider that. As far as it goes, though, airbrushing or something, I don't know. I would definitely, unless you're super handy with that type of thing, consider going to a professional, just because I would feel horrible messing up a synth or something like that. On the other hand, I probably shouldn't encourage you to not try things, you know, so, you know, DW6000 is not that expensive. You can maybe fuck it up a little bit. I don't know. I haven't really thought about that too much. I have, like, wanted to repair the Tolex on a couple of keyboards and stuff, so that might be a thing, but as far as airbrushing, I don't know about that. But anyways, I do feel like I need to, Death by Media says Turbo Kid on his bike in the Badlands. Yep. So I do feel like I need to sort of offer an opinion towards the end of the stream. And it's tough. It's tough. It's got a lot of pros and it's got some cons. It's got a great tone. The oscillator section can be really big. It's got a lot of what I like about the Kawai K3, but sounds better if you're just talking saw and square and stuff like that. The chorus section can go fuck itself, except for if you want that particular sound, you know, which for me is about a fifth of the time that I want a sound like that. So I'm probably tempted to not use this synth in stereo. I'll probably just use it in mono and then use something like my plugin Inktomi, which will be available for all members of this channel for free, by the way. So if you like the sounds, you know, you've been hearing it all night, consider becoming a member of the channel. Helps me out a lot. $5 a month. You get access to all the really cool subscriber emotes too, or the member emotes, I should say. So that's also a lot of fun. So if I can get some scum in the chat, I would appreciate it. It's hard for me to recommend this synth at the current price point. You know, someone was saying earlier that to buy one of these broken, the cheapest one is like $2,000 right now. And for me, I will never recommend a synth at that price point, especially if it doesn't tick all the boxes, as Florian would say. It's got a lot of cool boxes. It's got the high pass filter. It's got a separate envelope for the filter and the amplifier. It's only got one LFO. That's not strange. I think most of the great analog synths from the 70s and 80s only had one LFO per voice. And it's got a couple of tricks up its sleeve, like the start and different retrigger modes. You can reverse it, put it in saw. But the fact that the saw and square shape of the LFO is not sharp, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't love that. I'd prefer it over a too sharp shape, because you do hear that, and that's like, you'll hear that on some synths, and when it does a sawtooth sound, it's like clicky. It's really annoying, and there's nothing to do about it. So it's like, okay, I'll just never use it then, right? So it is better that it's a little smoothed out, because it is musical. So you could use it. But for me, I would like a little bit more sharpness from the filter. Thank you, Dubstation. What else do we have here? We can have a saw, a pulse width oscillator, and a square wave all on at once, and a sub oscillator. So that's a lot of oscillator going on. So maybe just for that, like if we had to say anything else, I think this is the only analog synth that I have that can be saw, pulse, square, and sub all on at once, right? For essentially 4 oscillators, but you're only getting detuned between the saw, pulse, and the square, but still capable of quite impressive, fat DCO analog sound. So, you know, shooting this out versus something like the Roland JX3P, for instance, this seems pretty good because it can do most of what's going on over there, and it has a couple of tricks up its sleeve. That has the Jupiter 8 filter. This is the Prophet 5 filter, so that's kind of, you know, whatever it goes. I definitely think I'm going to have to do some shootout videos between this, the Kawai K3, this, the Oberheim Matrix 6, this, the JX3P, because this one presents an interesting sort of problem or conundrum for me, because my goal with this studio has always been to sort of come up with a library of synthesizers that I feel are both useful but also affordable and represent sort of that perfect point of spending money smartly to get really great sounds. And for me, I think it does come down to the DCOs a little bit, and maybe it's just like if it had 1 or 2 more tricks up its sleeve or something, I think that would help me out a bit, because it's just a little bit I don't know, it's close. Dubstation says, I think the Matrix 6 is a good DCO comp. Yes, I think, I don't know, going into this, those are the 2 that I was thinking about. I was like, I might not keep both because there's a lot of overlap. This has the SSM chips, that has the CEM chips, that's an Oberheim, right? It's also, without a doubt, has more power as far as modulation goes. This is pretty simple. But this is also very immediate, whereas the Oberheim's kind of like a chore. So that also has its sort of pros and cons. So it's tough. I think if you could get a good price on this, this is a very special synth, because everybody loves the 80s DCO sort of Juno 106 sound, right? If you love that sound like a Juno 106, this is sort of like as awesome as it gets. This is, you know, and I think it compares more favorably to the Juno 6 and Juno 60 because those synths get expensive, like $4,000. And so if you can get one of these for less, you don't have the faders, so that sucks. But you can do a lot with this that's missing from that. But then there's also things like, you know, the chorus. At least you can kind of control the chorus a little bit better on the Junos. That's a really big deal for me, is that the ensemble's just not my favorite. Now, as far as my workflow is concerned, that's okay. I made a plugin to fix problems like this, and it's going to be available to all members of this channel. But for the average consumer of synths, it's hard to recommend a synthesizer like this, knowing that the chorus is sort of an Achilles heel. I don't mind programming it at all, but here's another thing. It's easier to program the Kawai K3, because you saw me like, you know, moving through like this to get the sound that I want, and then controlling whatever that parameter is, right? K3, I could just be, you know, VCF, EG, attack, press the button and move this. Decay, sustain, release, done. If I want to do that here, I guess it's just attack, you know, decay, sustain, release. It's not that much slower, but a lot of the times the way my brain works, I don't know that I would necessarily program this from like left to right. You know what I mean? Like you change the cutoff and then you go to the attack, and then you change the envelope amount, then you change the decay. You know, you sort of move back and forth. You saw I was programming earlier. You don't tend to program in a recipe-like fashion where you just start in one corner and kind of work down the way. But on the other hand, you know, if you're just programming the attack, decay, sustain, release, it's pretty fast. I can't really say it's faster or slower. But again, I just, you know, so again, I think the problem is the synth is similar to a lot of other synths that I have. It's probably closest in terms of what it can do to the JX3P. You can get a JX3P for like less than $1,000. I think $975 was the last one I saw. This is $2,500. So for that extra $1,500, what do you get from this that you don't get with the JX3P? And to be frank, not very much. You know, it's rare, it's beautiful, it sounds great. You know, the JX3P and I don't always, it's not the synth I go to for the sound a lot of the time. It's a very special, cool synth. But I would say I probably prefer the sound of this. I think that's fair. I just love the sound of SSM chips. But shooting it out against the Polysix, which you can get probably for like $1,900 or so, you know, I'm going to pick the Polysix every day. I just love that synth. And it's got, you can vary the speed on the chorus, the phaser, or the ensemble. And to me, just has that more warm, magical, analog thing. It just kind of does what I want it to do. And this, although it has a couple of tricks up its sleeve, like the different LFO shapes and the brass mode, which is ring mod, things like that. I don't know that they justify the jump in price and the fact that it doesn't have one knob per fader like the Polysix. So the Polysix is in a way the closest shootout. I would pick the Polysix over this. Kawai K3, very similar to this. I would, if I had to only have one of these two synths, I would keep the K6, the K3. Like, that's how much I think that synth sounds great. Shooting out just the sawtooths, you know, through the filter and everything, this one does eke it out. It's a little fatter, a little clearer, a little warmer, a little yada yada, right? But the K3 has a lot that makes up for that. A lot that makes up for that. So it's hard to say. Yeah, so I don't know what you guys think. What do you guys think? Before I end the stream, I want to know, what do you guys think about this synthesizer? Do you think it's worth $2,500? And if not, what would you recommend against it? You know, 40 Thieves, if you're still here, I want to know what you think about everything I just said. You know, am I missing something? You've got the auto bend. That's something you don't have on the other synths. Dubstation says it's a good DCO comp. Hey, Carla, how's it going? Welcome to the stream. Great fucking channel. You must be great, Carla. I appreciate you. I will see you next time too, okay? We're going to be checking out the Emu Proteus next week, so that's going to be really awesome. Proteus, one of my all-time favorite boards. Like, it is such a secret weapon, and you can usually get them for cheap. I just love it so much. So much. So it's going to be a really exciting stream. Really pumped about that. Machine Sword says Polyvox. Yes, love the Polyvox for sure. Aquatic Borealis says a bit pricey, although it sounds good. You could use external effects. Yeah, I for sure think, you know, on one hand, you could take this synth and run it through, you know, the Boss CE 3 or 2, like what Dubstation was saying, and get great results, right? But that's kind of true with a bunch of other synths that are cheaper. Like the Roland Alpha Juno 2, that with a retroactive programmer, that synth sounds great. And it's really flexible. It's got a lot going on, you know? So it's just hard to say. Walter says, it's a $1,200 to $2,000 synth working with minor issues. Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you can get it in that price range, that might be where this synth shines. That might be a good spot to be. I think if it's over that, this one gets a little tough. You know, because it's this synth borders into that vanity synth category where it's because it's so rare. Don't get me wrong, it's gorgeous, and I can't wait to put it up on the top row here because it does look good. And it's a special, rare, less than 1,000 ever made synthesizer. So for those reasons, it's amazing. But I mean, just being honest about the sound and the features, it's a little, yeah. Crystal Love says, I'd go with the Prologue. Well, I love the Prologue too. Machine Sword says, Audigy 2000. Yeah. Devastation Zero says, too spendy for me for what you get. Has to be the most expensive DCO there is. That's probably true. Juno 60, maybe notwithstanding. I didn't think about that, but this is probably about as much money, aside from the Juno 60, that you can spend on a DCO synth. I can't think of a DCO synth that costs more. But if you guys think of one, let me know. Let's see. Ripsonics, welcome to the stream. The K3 is a gem, and I snagged one on eBay 2 years ago for $340. That's awesome. The SX-240 should be around 1,000. I totally can see this being a $1,500 synth. You know, somewhat comparable with a Juno, because there are certain things, like a Juno 106, there's certain things about this that do elevate it in terms of sound. But yeah, it's tough. It's a little tough. Aquatic asks, why is it more pricey? Rarity? Yes, so there's probably only about 1,000 of these ever made. So that immediately will just, and it's gorgeous. I mean, it's definitely one of my favorite synths ever. I've got a little reflection coming from the light over there, but it is stunning. It's a very stunning synth. So, yeah. I think that's everything I have to say about this right now. I'd love to hear, especially if you're watching this video in the future too, please leave a comment below. That way I can, you know, kind of hear some opinions, because I would really like to sort of come up with an understanding about what the synth means for me, as well as going forward on the channel, like what type of synths I want to cover, because it's really cool, but is it, you know, is it what they go for cool? You know, it's arguable. I hope I did a good job of conveying, and you guys let me know, first off, how special and cool the synth really is, how great it really does sound, and then also that it is not like you don't need to spend that kind of money to have a really great special sound. It might not sound exactly like the SX-240, but you can get just a lot of really great synths for a price that's a lot more, you know. You know, watch my top 5 vintage synths for beginners video. There's a bunch of really great sounding synths for like $600 or less. So that makes it very hard to recommend something like this when there's other synths like that out there. So is it special? It's very special. Is it, you know, it's just got enough Achilles heels to make me kind of question it. So we'll have to figure this out. This is, you know, the question of like JX3P versus Matrix 6 versus SX-240 versus Kawai K3. It's like, that's a conundrum. It's a real, like, I don't need 4 synths that are all in that territory. You know what I mean? Like, that's too much in that same neighborhood. So I have to figure this out. I think I'm fucking losing my mind on the internet. All right, guys, I love you guys so much. Next week, we're going to be checking out the Emu Proteus. You guys are the best. J-Booth says, role player for me, and the K3 shines in some of the same sonic departments, plus it has more ease of use, but it's cool, man. Always wanted to hear it. Aquatic Boreax says, the Matrix 6 sounds awesome. I agree. It does sound great. I mean, it's just tough. All these fucking synths sound great. Yeah. Spend a bit more and get a Summit. There's no doubt in my mind that a Summit is a great value for a synth. So, yeah, I got to figure it out. I'm losing my mind live on the internet. I think it's time to call it a night. I love you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful week. Stay safe out there. Have a lot of really fulfilling sex. Love and light, bitches. I am out.